Star Walker Studios presents Game Master's Journey, your multi-dimensional RPG podcast. Hello, fellow gamer. Welcome to episode 213 of Game Master's Journey. I'm your host, like Star Walker. On this show, we discuss the craft and the art of game mastering. I've been running RPGs for over 26 years now, and I produce this show in the hopes that you can benefit from my experience, my triumphs, and my mistakes. On today's episode, I'm going to cover a variety of topics. I'm going to have some GM Q&A, and I'm going to share some listener GM feedback with you. So we've been rocking out the actual play episodes lately, and I hope that you've been enjoying that. So far, as part of this podcast, I've released up through session 6 of the actual play of Hinterlands of Elandria, my new D&D campaign. And as far as on my YouTube channel, I've released up through session 10 of the campaign. So again, we're quite a bit ahead on the YouTube channel. I'm actually caught up now as of recording this on the videos. I was having some issues with the video recordings that held things up for a few weeks, but I'm caught back up now. Up through episode 10 is up on YouTube. We're playing session 11 this next week. However, still getting caught up on the audio version. But hopefully in the next month or so, I'll be able to get completely caught up. But it does take a lot more time to produce the audio version because I reprocess the audio so it sounds better than the video, and do more editing and things like that. And so it just takes time to put them out. I'm putting them out as quickly as I can. So I thought it was time that we do a more regular episode today because we've been doing a lot of actual play lately. And I know not all the listener GMs out there dig the actual play, so I want to put out content for the rest of you, even though I'm trying to get caught up on the actual play. And I've had some really great feedback from listener GMs, and some questions and things I want to address that have been kind of stacking up while I've been doing all this actual play stuff. So I thought today, instead of having one big topic that we tackle, we'll tackle some of these smaller topics. All right, but before we get to the Q&A, I do have some announcements and kind of news about what's going on with Game Master's Journey and such that I want to share with you. First of all, as they say a lot of times, I have good news and bad news for you today. So let's start with the good news. The good news is I am releasing the old episodes of Game Master's Journey. So for the last year or two, I think, the older episodes of the show have been archived and were only available to patrons. However, I am in the process of re-releasing all those episodes so that everyone can enjoy them, not just the patrons. So because of limitations of my hosting provider, I can only have 100 episodes in the actual RSS feed that you're likely subscribed to through your podcast app or however you get the show. So that feed, that RSS feed that you're probably getting in your app, can only have 100 episodes in it. So that is going to have the most recent episodes of the show, as well as some of the greatest hits of the show, if you will, some of the most popular episodes. However, I am working on getting all the episodes back up on the public part of the website. So even though that feed that you have in your app will only have 100 episodes, if you go to starwalkerstudios.com/Game Master's Journey, there will be even more episodes available there. So as of recording this today, I have currently re-released all the episodes all the way back to episode 90 of the show. So now on the website, you can listen to all the episodes from episode 90 to this episode 213. And I will get the episodes 1 to 89 back up on the site as quickly as I can. It just takes some time to do that. Once I get all of the Game Master's Journey episodes back in on the public area of the site, I'm then going to be doing the same thing with GM Intrusions and re-releasing all of those episodes as well. So probably not much impact for people who've been listening to this show since the beginning, but for newer listeners who've started listening in the last year or so, or year or two, this means that there's going to be a lot of older episodes that you're going to have access to that you didn't before. So definitely check your app and scroll down to the bottom of the list and see the new episodes. And again, there's even more episodes on the website at starwalkerstudios.com. So that's the good news. The bad news is I've been having some issues with my website. And I've heard from a lot of you, people telling me they're having issues downloading episodes. And I just want to let you know, of course, if you're listening to this, obviously you got the episode somehow. But I just want to let everybody know that I am aware of this problem. It is a problem with my website. My website is hosted by Squarespace, and it's a problem on their end. And they are supposedly trying to fix it, but I've been going round and round with them for a couple weeks now without any sign of any real progress. But they're supposedly working on fixing it. But unfortunately, there's really nothing I can do about it because it's completely on their end. So this is actually holding up the re-release of the old episodes right now because I don't want to upload a bunch of new episode or old episodes to the site when they're not working and they can't be downloaded. So I'm kind of waiting for Squarespace to get this issue fixed before I finish uploading the rest of the episodes. Now, for the most part, downloading from the site should work for you. So if you go to the show notes for any of the episodes, at the top of the show notes, there's a green download button. So you click on that button, it should download for you. If that doesn't work for you, please let me know and let me know what episode isn't working. Because what I've been doing to kind of stopgap this while I'm waiting for a fix is sometimes if people are having a problem with an episode, I can re-upload it and then it'll work at least for a while. So if you're trying to download from the site and it's not working, let me know and I can see what I can do about that. There are a couple apps that it seems like consistently work for people. I use BeyondPod and I haven't had any problems whatsoever downloading the episodes on BeyondPod. I heard from listener GM Christopher, I believe it was, who uses the Google Play app, and he said he hasn't had any problems getting episodes with the Google Play app. Some apps that I have heard people are having problems with are Player FM and the Apple podcast app, whatever that's called. So if you're using an app and you're having problems downloading episodes, I would just suggest either going to the website and downloading the episode from there or trying a different app. And I mean, I know that's not a good solution, but it's really all I can give you right now because again, there's nothing I can personally do to fix this. And also the player on the website doesn't work. And I think that's actually the root of this problem. And I've been trying to get the folks at Squarespace to focus on getting that player to work, because I suspect that's the linchpin of this issue. But yeah, the player on the site does not work, but the download button should work. And again, if that download button doesn't work, please let me know which episode it is, and I'll see if I can re-upload it and if that'll make it work. So I want to give a huge thank you to listener GM Josiba. I hope I'm saying your name right, sir. I don't know how much time this man spent looking into this for me, but he knows a lot more about coding and how all this stuff works than I do. And he did a lot of testing on his end and working with folks from the app that he uses, which I think was Player FM, and got me a bunch of diagnostic information, which I could forward to Squarespace, which I did. Unfortunately, I don't have any confidence that Squarespace is paying any attention to that. Their customer service leaves a lot to be desired in their tech support. But I've done what I could, and I really appreciate what Josiba did. I just hope it actually is being utilized by the folks at Squarespace and not being ignored. And also, I told him, I'm like, I'm just forwarding this on the Squarespace because most of it means nothing to me. It's way over my head. And so he gave me this very dumbed down explanation of what was happening or what he thinks is happening, using fantasy RPG terms that was hilarious. So thank you for that. That was awesome. Also, in regards to the Hinterlands of Elandria actual play, I just want to let you know that I am no longer live streaming those sessions. I used to live stream them on Tuesdays, and I'm not live streaming them anymore, mainly because there weren't many people watching it, honestly, and it produces a lot of technical hassles to deal with on top of everything else. So I decided to stop live streaming them, but I am still recording the video and I am still uploading them to YouTube. And the nice thing for you about this is I'm now doing a little bit of editing of the video, which is for the most part cutting out big chunks at the beginning and the end where we're not actually playing the game, while we're waiting for people to get there and stuff. That when it was a live stream, that was all stuff people had to suffer through. But now that I'm not live streaming, I can edit some of that stuff out. So it's more to the point. So as of the time you're hearing this, session 10 is definitely out on the site, or should definitely be out on the site by the time you hear this, if you are ready for the 10th session of the actual play. I'm also going to be doing another installment of the Behind the Screen series soon. I've gotten some good questions and comments on the videos on YouTube. And so I have some things to talk about. So I just want to remind you, if you're watching or listening to the actual play and you have any comments or questions that you'd like addressed in a behind the screen episode, please head on over to YouTube and comment on the appropriate video. And I will use those comments when I do the next behind the screen episode. I want to give a shout out and thank you to some new patrons that have joined the Star Walker Studios family. So thank you to Patiri, Alexi, Coral, and Michael. And I hope I said all your names right, but thank you very much to the new patrons, and thank you to all the patrons. I really appreciate your support. And finally, my final announcement for today's episode, and this is an announcement I'm really excited to make. I've been looking forward to making this announcement. I am going to be very soon self-publishing yet another D&D 5th edition supplement. And the working title of this supplement right now is Relics of Primordia. I think there's a good chance I'm going to change the title because I'm thinking I probably don't want the of Primordia in the title because this is not a Primordia specific thing. This is going to be a supplement for anyone, no matter what setting you're using for your game. So what is this? What is this going to be? I should probably tell you. So what this is this is detailing my Relics system, which basically what Relics are is they are a class of magic item that changes the power of the item depending on the power of the player character wielding it. Put more simply, the power level of the magic item scales with the level of the player. And this, I've actually played with these items since 2nd edition days in the 90s, running D&D when I was in high school. And I've used them ever since. They've always been something I use in my games. And a year or so ago, I kind of codified my 5th edition version of how these items work. And I actually did a write-up that was available to the patrons about, how these items work, how you can create them and all that good stuff. And I've mentioned it once or twice on the show. And I've had a lot of listener GMs ask me, hey, is there any way I could see that? So when I was making a list of different RPG PDFs that I could do, that was definitely at the top of the list because I've had a lot of requests from people to see that. So I've been working on it, and as of recording this, it's pretty much done as far as the writing. I'm going to do another revision pass, and then I just need to lay it out. And once that's done, it will be ready to publish. So you can keep an eye out at starwalkerstudios.com. That's where it will be available for sale once it's released, starwalkerstudios.com/store. I'm sure I'll announce it on Twitter when it's out, and I'm sure I'll announce it on the Game Master's Journey forum and in the community on Google+. So those are all ways that you can find out when this is released. Will probably be released in the next week or two. It just depends how long it takes me to lay it out. So I actually have a dozen or so PDFs planned for D&D that I'm going to release here in the coming months. And I'd floated an idea out to the community some time ago about doing a large project for a D&D supplement that would have Primordia stuff and homebrewed stuff that I come up with for my games, like spells and magic items and subclasses and feats and all that good stuff, backgrounds. And there didn't seem to be a lot of interest in that as far as a large product that I could kickstart. So what I've decided to do instead in the meantime, and until I see that there's more interest in something larger like that, is to put out smaller products that will take less time and money to develop. And, I can still put some stuff out for you that you can get a hold of. And then I can use that as kind of a gauge of how much interest there is in what kinds of things, and maybe in the future do something bigger. So I have about a dozen of these planned right now that I've already done quite a bit of writing on. And so this is the first one. So what this will be, or what it will contain, is it will have a complete explanation of what relics are and how you can create them, how you can create your own relics for your game from scratch, and also how you can take existing items in the game, like a magic item from the Dungeon Master's Guide, and convert it into a relic. And then it will have probably a dozen or so example relics. And a couple of these will be included as part of the explanation as examples as I walk you through, here's how you create a relic. And then the rest of them will just be new magic items that you can use in your game that are relics. So the way these relics work is what the item can do depends on the level of the character wielding it. And there's a whole system as to how that works. But in a way, each single relic item is really a few different magic items put together, because it's a completely different magic item when it's wielded by, say, an 18th level character than it is when it's wielded by a 3rd level character. It's completely different properties. So in a sense, it's actually going to have quite a bit more than 12 magic items, but it's going to have at least 12 of these relics as examples for you. And one thing that I think is kind of cool, that I'm kind of excited about, is among those sample relics will be relics that I'm using in my current campaign, Hinterlands of Elandria. So if you've been watching or listening to the actual play, then you know that each of the player characters has a special magic item that they started out with, and these items are relics. And what I'm going to do, how I'm going to do this, is those are going to be in the book, but they're going to be in the book in their current form. So right now, at the time I'm recording this, the player characters are 5th level, so their relics are 5th level relics, I guess you could say. So as the campaign progresses and as the characters gain levels, these items will get more powerful and gain more abilities. But one of the selling points of relics, I think, is that as a GM, you don't have to define what this thing's going to look like at 20th level when the player character is 1st level. You can kind of do it as you go, and in that way more tailor it to the character as the character develops. So because of this, for instance, my relics I'm using in my campaign right now, I have some ideas of what they're going to do at higher levels, but I haven't actually sat down and defined, this is what the relic will do at this level, and this will do what it will do at that level. I just have it defined up to the point where the player characters currently are, level 5. So that means when this supplement comes out, those relics will only go up to, say, level 5. But what I will do is, as the campaign progresses and as I develop these relics in the higher levels, I will update this PDF with the revised version of the relics. So, if you buy the PDF a week from now, they may only go up to, say, level 5. But through the coming months, as I develop these items more, I will update that PDF with the new version. So, eventually By the time the campaign's over, presumably they'll go all the way up to level 20 or whatever. So I think that'll be fun. It'll be a way that for those of you that get this fairly early, you'll be able to get some updates and some new content going forward, which I think will be pretty cool. And that way I also, like I said, I don't even have them developed all the way out to level 20. But I could do that, right, for the PDF. But this way I also avoid spoilering my own campaign to any players who might buy this PDF, and also for anyone just watching the campaign that might buy this PDF. This way anybody can buy the PDF and not worry about being spoiled on the campaign, whether they're part of the audience or one of the players. So I think that'll be fun and pretty cool. So as of now, this will be an electronic product only. It will just be a PDF that you can order and then use on your pad or your computer or whatever, or print off. I'd love to do a physical print version, but there's a lot more involved with that, and that's probably something that would be reserved for something I would kickstart, where we could do some kind of print on demand version or something like that, which again, I'd love to do if the interest is there. So I'll keep you posted on that, but I'd say there's a good chance that it will be out before I produce the next episode of Game Master's Journey. So if you're interested in checking out my Relic supplement when it comes out, definitely follow me on Twitter or Google Plus, or join our forum, because I will definitely announce it in all those places. So yeah, I'm really excited to get this out to you guys and to see what you think about it. I've been working on it for a long time. Oh, you know what I forgot to talk about is why this is a thing. Like, why would you want relics in your game? I think a lot of you, the answer to that is probably obvious, which is why I almost forgot to mention it, because it seems pretty obvious, but it may not be obvious, like what the purpose of this is. So here's the thing, okay? The way this game works, and it was more true in previous editions, but it's still true to some degree, is that if I'm a GM and I'm running for a brand new group of player characters in their first level, I don't really want to give a first level character a Vorpal sword or a Holy Avenger or something like that, right? Because that creates a bunch of problems. And at least in most campaigns, that isn't something that I want to do. But what do I do? Like, let's say I have a player character, maybe he's a paladin, and as part of the player's backstory, he wants to have this ancestral sword that's magical and been handed down in his family for generations upon generations. And this is very much a part of the concept of the character, is he wields this sword of his father's, right? Well, that's awesome. From a story perspective, that's awesome. And I would totally want to do that as a GM. But from a game mechanics perspective, it can create a challenge, because it's like, well, how do I handle that? And with for instance, 5th edition as it's presented, my options are, I give the character a non-magical sword that will always be non-magical. Which, again, we've said it before in the show that 5th edition is designed assuming characters don't have magic items. So you don't have to give out any magic items. But in most campaigns, a 20th level paladin is going to have some kind of magic weapon, right? So in most campaigns, giving my player character at first level a sword that is not magical, and that's a sword they're going to use forever, is fine at first level, but by the later stages of the game is going to be unsatisfying. And what about all the times that player character, in a treasure hoard finds some kind of magical sword? They're going to, on some level, want to be able to use that, like that Frost brand sword that they find. But because of story reasons, they don't want to use it, because their whole part of their character concept is, why use this ancestral weapon? And I wouldn't just throw it out to use some random magic sword I found somewhere, right? But from a game mechanics perspective, you want to do that, because the ancestral weapon's this non-magical weapon, and the sword you found has all these bonuses or does all these cool things, right? So, that's one issue. And, So the one way to approach it is, well, at first level, I just give you a non-magical sword, or at first level, I give you a magical sword, but something more appropriate for a first level character, like a +1 sword. So again, at the low levels, that'll be great. And at first level, it'll be especially great because usually you don't start out the game with a magic weapon. So that's pretty cool. But again, by high level play, that +1 sword, while still nice, isn't as great. And, what if you come across a Holy Avenger or something? You're going to be like, wow, I'd really like to have this Holy Avenger instead of this +1 sword. But my ancestral weapon as part of my character concept is the +1 sword. And of course, the third possibility is I could just give the character the Holy Avenger at first level, and say that's your ancestral sword. That will be very satisfying at the end of the game because it's an appropriate quote end game item. And for the player, maybe satisfying in the early levels of the game to have this crazy legendary weapon that's way overpowered for where they're at. But for me as a GM, is not going to be terribly satisfying because now, well, for one thing, the one character is way more powerful than the others. And it seems kind of unfair to give one character a legendary weapon at first level and everybody else gets nothing. So I might be tempted to give everybody a legendary item, which is just going to compound the problem of them hitting way above their weight class, So the rules are assuming that your first level characters don't have any magic items. They're assuming that your 20th level characters don't have any magic items. So to have a first level character with a Holy Avenger, they're just going to tear apart encounters that normally would be a good challenge. And so now I'm in this position of either this encounter is no challenge to the character with the Holy Avenger, or I make the encounter challenging for the character with the Holy Avenger, but now I'm wiping out all the other characters because they don't have Holy Avengers and they're not as powerful. So it just creates this huge hassle for the rest of your campaign that you have to deal with of balancing this one character that's super powerful compared to everyone else. And the group as a whole is more powerful than what they quote should be at that level. And if you solve that by giving all the characters powerful items at first level, then, well, now the players are equal, which solves that problem. But now the issue of them being more powerful than they quote should be is much worse. And then you deal with things like, well, maybe you give them weapons. So offensively, they're hitting like maybe 10th level characters or something. But as far as their armor class and hit points and saving throws, they're still first level characters. So, it creates problems because it's like, well, they can take out things that are way higher than them as far as the damage they can do, but they can't take it back. So, you're building these encounters which either feel like they're no challenge because the PCs are doing so much damage, they're just wiping them out. Or if you try to make it more challenging in that way, then the PCs are dropping left and right because they don't have the armor class and hit points to deal with these more powerful foes you're throwing at them. So, and there's so many permutations of this, right? Like maybe you give them magic armor and it's like, well, now they have better armor class. They don't get hit as often, but they still have the hit points of a first level character. So if they do get hit, which is going to happen, someone's going to roll a 20 at the very least, then they're probably going to get wiped out because they don't have very many hit points. So it just makes your life as a GM a lot harder. But then what do you do with this character that wants to have this ancestral weapon? Another facet of this problem, I think it's all one problem, but another kind of aspect of it is, that sometimes you have a player that just wants to have, their weapon or their item that's associated with them. Just like, King Arthur had Excalibur, He-Man had the Sword of Power, right? The Seeker had the Sword of Truth. In stories, it's very common for heroes to have a weapon or armor or whatever, some item that they wield that is as well known as they are, and they're known to carry that item. And you can't really do that in an RPG when the player character is getting a new sword every few levels that's better than the one before. So, that can be unsatisfying too. So relics are my answer to all of this, because with a relic, I can give a character an item at first level that is a magic item of an appropriate power level, or maybe it doesn't even have any magical properties at first level, But as the character adventures and gains power and experience, this item can also gain power so that they can have the same sword or the same suit of armor or whatever it is. That can be any kind of item through their whole career if they want it. And the item will always be appropriate for where they're at as far as the power level and their progression in the game. And it's a really simple, elegant solution to this issue, I think. And there's other aspects too, like, even if you have say a fighter character who doesn't really care about their weapon that much, they just want the same or the best weapon they can have, right? And they don't care about, oh, I want to have Excalibur and always have Excalibur. You still have the thing of, well, every few levels they find something better. And now they have all these leftover magic items. And what do you do with those? Are they going to sell them to someone for a ton of money? Or are they going to start equipping, their henchmen with magic items or what? So that can cause some issues too, or some consequences in your campaign where you have all these magic items floating around now. So, I found that the relics are especially useful if you don't want to be handing out a ton of magic items. If you want not necessarily a low magic campaign, but just a campaign where the characters aren't finding magic items around every corner and they have maybe a smaller number of magic items, but maybe they're more powerful magic items or whatever. It's a lot easier to do that with these relics because you can give them an item at low level that they'll keep their entire career. And you don't have to worry about, oh, well, eventually they're going to find an item that's better. And then they're going to have this extra item laying around and what's going to happen with that item. So I've found in my games that I run that they just solve a lot of issues and they're really fun from a thematic story point of view because it really lets this item become a part of the character in a way that magic items a lot of times don't because they are eventually used up or replaced or whatever or upgraded. So it works really well for me in my game. And I think you'll enjoy it. So I'm really looking forward to you guys being able to check this out and to getting feedback of what people think. And I hope, now that we have a forum, I hope that once this is out in the wild and you guys are using it, that you'll start posting the relics that you come up with to the forum so that we can all check them out. And, GMs can maybe use a relic you came up with in their game. Because really the possibilities are endless when it comes to relics you can come up with. And again, you can even take an item from the DMG and convert it into a relic. Works really good with legendary items and even artifacts. So there's a lot of flexibility with it and a lot of applications that it can be put to. You can also use it with NPCs. So there's just so much you can do with relics. So I can't wait for you guys to check it out and let me know what you think. For our GM Q&A segment today, I thought I would share with you an email I got some time back from listener GM Tony. Tony says, "Hey Lex, thanks for doing Game Master's Journey. I've enjoyed the episodes which have assisted me through some necessary sections of the DMG. I'm a new DM and haven't really played much D&D. My question is about how I should manage the role of a DM regarding letting players do what they want to do versus ensuring that the game mechanics are adhered to." So I'm sharing this letter with you today because Tony asked a lot of really good questions here, and these are questions that I think a lot of GMs face at some point in their GMing experience. And a lot of times these are things as GMs that we wrestle with when we're relatively new GMs. There are so many roles involved in running a game, and a lot of times our books for whatever games we're playing, we'll talk a lot about how the game works and the rules and adjudicating things in the game. But one of the major hats that a GM has to wear is managing the players, managing the table, and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of times the guidance given by our games is limited or non-existent. And this can often be the most challenging part of being a GM, especially if you're a new GM, especially if you have, for lack of a better term, challenging players like some of what Tony is dealing with here. So I thought this would be a great thing to share on the show, because I think a lot of you are facing issues either exactly like this or similar to this. And we can start to talk a little bit about how to approach these more kind of managerial responsibilities that we have as a GM. So Tony goes on to say, I have one particular player who just wants to be extremely powerful and succeed at everything. If he rolls anything above a 5, he wants it to be a success. And if he rolls below a 5, he just wants to re-roll. He doesn't ever want to experience a quote failure or negative outcome in the game. He is constantly telling me what the difficulty of a specific action should be, which typically occurs after a roll is made. So yeah, there's just here, there's quite a bit to unpack. I mean, it's not hard to see why this player would be a challenging person to deal with at the table. And, you know, some of this is just, I think, managing player expectations. And you know, it seems like such an obvious thing, but it seems like this player at least doesn't seem to understand that part of playing a game means that success is not guaranteed. If you're engaging in a social group activity where success is guaranteed, I'm not sure what you're doing, but you're not playing a game. Part of playing a game is there's a chance to win or lose, right? Or succeed or fail. I mean, from this paragraph here, it sounds like this player has a lot of personal issues that kind of go beyond the scope of being a GM. You're not this player's parents. You're not their psychiatrist or whatever. So, you know, as a GM, you have to make the call with any given player that you're having issues with, if it's even something you want to deal with. You know, I mean, like I said, it's not your job to be their mom and dad. It's not your job to teach them how the world works or how to act around other people. And there's nothing wrong with saying, you know, this isn't what I signed up for. I want to run a game. I don't want to teach you how to be a human being. You're just not going to work out for this group. So that's always a valid response. Don't feel like you have to accommodate every single player that shows up at your table, because you don't. Because part of your responsibility as a GM, I think, is to ensure the fun of everybody at the table, which includes yourself and includes all the other players. And sometimes you can be trying so hard to accommodate a player who's causing difficulties, and you don't realize that this player is really spoiling the fun for everyone. And at that point, you're kind of making this one person at the table more important than everyone else put together, because you're trying to accommodate them, even though by doing so, you're killing the fun for everyone else at the table, including yourself. So in those situations, the best thing is often just to get rid of that problem player who doesn't fit in or who's causing issues, or whatever they're doing that's leading to the other people at the table not having fun. You can't always make everybody happy. So, you know, in those situations, I try to make the most people happy. And if I've got 6 players and plus myself is 7 people, and there's one person causing problems for everyone else, I mean, the solution there is pretty obvious. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, or the one, right? All right, so let's go on to Tony's email some more, because he gives us some more specifics here. But as far as what he said so far, you know, I just informed this player, hey, I set the difficulty, not you, and rolling above a 5 isn't a success. 5 is actually the lowest difficulty class defined in the game, and it's even suggested in the books that if you're going to give something a DC of 5, consider just not even calling for a roll, because most characters, even low-level characters, are almost guaranteed to succeed at a DC 5 check if they have anything giving them any kind of bonus on that roll at all. So it's suggested that if you're considering a DC 5 check, maybe just let them succeed unless there's an interesting consequence of failure. So, you know, to think that rolling anything above a 5 should succeed at whatever you're trying to do is just simply ridiculous. And yeah, you know, the player shouldn't be telling you what the difficulty of the roll should be. And yeah, that just doesn't fly. I definitely nip that in the bud. So Tony goes on to say, although I've told the group that if they want to do something, just let me know, and I will instruct them how to go about doing the thing they want to do if it's possible. This player, however, will say, for instance, after entering a room, oh, I'm a rogue and I want to make a check for hidden treasures, and then instantly roll a perception check, and then an intelligence check, and then a history check. And if any of them are above 5, he then says something like, oh, cool, I got it. So do I find a +4 dagger or 1,000 GP? Tony says, I keep going back to reminding them that they need to tell me what they want to do, and then I will instruct them what I want them to roll in order to attempt what they're trying to do. Then, when I say I'm going to ignore any roll that I haven't called for, that particular player gets frustrated, says it's not fun, and then asks to speak to me after the game to tell me they need +5 weapons and hundreds of GP, blah, 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 blah. So, again, I have to ask you, is this player really worth it? To me, it doesn't sound like this player is remotely worth it. But it sounds like Tony's doing the right things here. He's telling them, look, don't roll until I call for a roll and I tell you what you're rolling for, what your target is, if I'm going to share that with you, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm not going to accept rolls that you just roll on your own. That's definitely the advice I would give. And it sounds like he's doing that. But the problem is then this player gets frustrated. And my answer to that is too bad. It's kind of on the player that he's getting frustrated. If you're a player in my game and I've told you that I'm not going to accept rolls until I ask for them, and you go into a room and make all these rolls before I even say anything, and then I'm like, well, sorry, none of those rolls count, because I didn't ask for them, and you get frustrated, that's on you. I'm sorry, but that's on the player. Stick to your guns, Tony, and any other GM in this situation. Don't accept rolls that you haven't asked for. Whether it's good or bad, it doesn't matter. No matter what they roll, say, well, unfortunately that roll doesn't mean anything because I haven't asked for a roll yet. And, maybe the player get frustrated or angry or whatever, but they're either going to stop playing your game, which solves your problem, or they're going to learn and they're going to modify their behavior in the future, which also solves your problem. So just be consistent and put your foot down. So Tony says, how should I best manage the DM role of determining what they roll for checks, how difficult monsters are, how much gold actually drops, and how quickly they progress with gear? Am I spoiling their fun if they want to be wicked powerful at level 1? Should I let them get equipment that they probably shouldn't have and then start throwing really difficult monsters at them? I want them to have fun, but I also feel some sense of responsibility to maintain the basic game mechanics and expectations. If not, why have a DM? Because the players can just load up a map, populate some monsters, ensure that they win combat, and award themselves as much gold as they want. Yeah, exactly. And again, it's a game, right? And as soon as you just put it on easy mode or God mode and give the players everything they want and they get whatever they want without working for it, it's not a game anymore. And most players aren't going to have much fun with that, and they're going to get bored with it, and they're not going to want to play anymore. So my first thing here for Tony or anyone else in this situation is first of all, step back and reevaluate things, because we as GMs, we're emotional human beings, and it can be easy to get swept up in things that are happening and kind of lose perspective. So, Tony here is thinking about all these things about, oh, should I give out more treasure? Should I make the encounters easier and all this stuff? And so the first thing to ask yourself is it just one player that's having issues with this? Or is it the entire group? Because it sounds here, from this email, that either it's the entire group that feels this way, or Tony is maybe letting this one player, this one squeaky wheel, this one loud complainer in the group, kind of skew his perception of how the group is actually reacting to the campaign. So, if Tony's got, 6 players, and this one player is complaining about everything under the sun, but everybody else is happy, then I wouldn't change anything. The problem isn't with what you're doing, because the rest of the other 5 players are happy. The problem is with this one player and what they seem to want from the game, and their what they're wanting being very different from what the rest of you want. So as far as how to manage, what to roll for checks, how difficult to make the monsters, how much gold to drop, all that stuff, since you're a relatively new GM, and I'd say the same to any newer GM, is just follow the guidelines in the books. The DMG gives very clear guidelines as far as how much treasure to award at different levels, how much magic items. It has encounter building guidelines to let you know what kind of encounters to build, different levels. Also, Xanathar's guide has some different approaches to those things as well. So just follow that. And something that Tony says here is he says, am I spoiling their fun if they want to be wicked powerful at level 1? Basically saying, if I don't give them crazy magic items right away, am I spoiling their fun? And the answer is simply no. First of all, D&D 5th edition, which I believe is what you're running here, doesn't assume any magic items on the part of the player characters at all. Now, if you have experience with previous editions of D&D, this is very different from how it's been in the past. I think 4th edition was the same way, but I didn't play it. But I know that 3rd edition, for instance, it was assumed that at certain points, player characters had certain levels of magic items, especially magical weapons, and there were a lot of higher level monsters that assumed that the player characters would have magical weapons. And if they didn't, or if they didn't have magical weapons that were powerful enough, then they could be in real trouble. 5th edition is very different in that the game is constructed with the assumption that the player characters have 0 magic items at all. So even at 20th level, they can be fighting whatever monsters or whatever they'd be fighting at 20th level. And you could have handed out 0 magic items in the course of the entire campaign, and they'd be fine. They'd be able to handle the encounter and it'd be just fine, through the use of spells and abilities and whatnot. Xanathar's guide goes into a little bit more detail in this, and one clarification that they make in there is that, this is assuming a quote regular or normal or average D&D party. So, your party might be different. And the one example they gave is if you have a party with no spellcasters, then they might have problems without any magic items, because part of the assumption that the game makes is that you're going to have some spellcasters in the party that, for instance, can cast magic weapon. So if you're fighting a creature that is resistant to non-magical weapons, then at least one character in the party should be able to cast magic weapon and have a magic weapon. But if you don't have any spellcasters, then that's not the case. And then that might be an exception to the players don't need any magic weapons. But in 5th edition, I'd say it's almost impossible to have a party without any spellcasters, unless that's the goal that the players have during character creation, is to create a party without any spellcasters, because most of the classes in the game are straight up spellcasters. And even the ones that aren't, like the fighter and the rogue, for instance, have subclasses that give some spellcasting ability. So there are far fewer classes without any kind of spellcasting than there are classes with it. So I'd say it's a pretty good outlier that you'd be dealing with a party without any spellcasters. So in general, you don't need to hand out any magic items at all. And you certainly don't need to worry about handing out super powerful magic items at low level. And again, the DMG has guidelines, and Xanathar's guide also has guidelines on, what kind of magic items are appropriate at different levels. And for a new GM, I would stick to those guidelines, and they won't steer you wrong. And if you stick with those, for instance, up till 4th level or 5th level, you shouldn't be handing out any magic items more powerful than uncommon. And then 5th to 10th level, you shouldn't be handing out magic items more powerful than rare, and et cetera, et cetera. And if you follow those guidelines, then you will avoid handing out an item that is so far above the power curve of where the player characters are that suddenly, your encounters are too easy, and it creates a huge headache for you, because now they're hitting so far above their weight class, you're not sure how to challenge them anymore. So if you stay within those guidelines in the DMG, you won't hopefully get into that situation. So in a nutshell, Tony, I think you're doing everything right. I just keep doing what you're doing, stick to your guns, and really think about, if you want this player at your table, if it's really worth the hassle. I can't tell you what to do. I don't have nearly enough information. I don't know the people involved, but just going by what's in the email here, it doesn't sound to me like this player is worth the trouble. And, it's not just the headache this player is causing for you, the GM. It's also, how annoying is this behavior to the rest of the players who are trying to get into the story and have a good time, and this one guy is constantly metagaming and complaining that he doesn't have a +5 dagger or whatever, and for me, that would be the big metric. If I was the only one bothered by it and the other players didn't care, I'd be more likely perhaps to accommodate this player, or at least try to have a talk with this player and say, hey, look, these are the things you're doing that aren't working. And, you need to either adjust, or this just isn't the group for you, because I'm not going to be giving you these crazy magic items you want right now. And I'm not going to accept roles that I don't ask for, et cetera, et cetera. Just set the ground rules and leave it up to the player. Hey, are you going to play by these rules or not? If you're not, then, we don't really want you in our game anymore. So if I'm the only one bothered by it, I'd be more inclined to do something like that. However, if it seems like the rest of the players are as annoyed by this behavior as I am, or if it's impinging on their fun or the group dynamic, then I would be much less likely to do that, and more likely just to tell this player that, hey, you're just not going to work out. Because again, I feel very strongly that part of my job as a GM is to make sure everybody's having a good time. And like they say, it only takes one bad apple to ruin the bunch. And it only takes one person at your table who's being antisocial or just on a completely different page than everyone else to ruin the game for everyone. And it's not worth it for one person who is, at least in this example, is doesn't seem to be making any effort to accommodate the group or the GM, and it just wants everything their way right now. And I personally just don't have much patience for those kinds of people. I'd be curious how old this player is. This sounds very much like a very young player. This sounds very much like players I ran for when I was in high school. So that could be an issue too. If you're running for mainly adults and you've got, a kid in the group, then, you can have problems like this because they often have a very different outlook. And I guess for completeness, to address, because sometimes I hear from GMs who have problems like this, and it's amazing how many emails and stuff I get that are really about this aspect of GMing, not about, how do I run the game, but how do I manage the players and how do I deal with these conflicts that come up? And, sometimes I hear from GMs where kicking the player out just isn't an option for whatever reason. Maybe they're really good friends, or it's someone's kid and, they have to play or whatever. So what should Tony or someone in this situation do if that's the case? And I don't know, that gets more sticky. It really depends how much you're willing to compromise your game for one person, how important it really is to you to have this one person at the table. But one thing you can try, and I've tried this myself, and I've had times where it worked and I've had times where it didn't work. But what you can try sometimes, if you're stuck with this player for whatever reason, is try giving them what they want. Again, I only recommend this if you're stuck with the player. I would take all my other advice before you get to this point. But if you're stuck with this player, sometimes just try giving them what they want, or I should say what they think they want. And if this player is at all enlightened, there's a possibility that, you give him the thing that he wants and he's either satisfied now and that's the end of it, or more likely he's not satisfied, but has the self-awareness to realize that he's never going to be satisfied. And kind of the light bulb goes on and he's like, oh, the DM just handing me stuff isn't really as much fun as I thought. And yeah, I've got this +5 sword or whatever now, but it hasn't really changed my experience of the game that much. My experience of the game has much more to do with my own outlook and what I'm bringing to the table than what the GM gives me, blah, 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 blah. And like I've said, I've had times where I've done that and it kind of like the player kind of learned something and ended up being a better player. But more often it just didn't work. But that could be a last resort if for some reason, getting rid of this player isn't an option. It's been a while since I've done a feedback segment on the show, and I've had quite a bit of good feedback that's piled up in recent weeks. So I thought I'd take some time today to share some of this with you. So Dwayne wrote in and said, "Hi, Lex. I enjoyed episode 207 this morning. And episode 207 was all about random encounters, or as I like to call them, flexible encounters." Dwayne says, "I've never been a big fan of random encounters, as I prefer encounters to have meaning. But now you've given me reasons why they can have meaning. Several good reasons, too. Thank you for that." Well, you're welcome, Dwayne. So in episode 207, I also talked a little bit about some of the frustrations I've been dealing with lately as a podcaster, and heard from a few listeners who had encouraging words to say, which I really appreciate. Dwayne says that, as you've mentioned, you've been struggling with some of the crap life throws at you. I just wanted to let you know that I really enjoy your podcast. Stay healthy, sir, and keep enjoying your life as best you can. I'll be on the sidelines cheering for you. So thank you so much, Dwayne. I really appreciate that. And thank you to everyone who let me know that they enjoy the podcast. It definitely helps deal with all this crap and just keep going. Thomas wrote in as well, also talking a little bit about episode 207, which was about random encounters. And Thomas says, "This message is just for you. You rock." I wrote in once to let you know about how you turned this hobby back around for me, and now let me give you some words of encouragement and praise. I'm a little behind on listening because of my crazy schedule, but dude, you are one of my main go-to shows. You always keep me thinking about how to improve my GM skills and my gaming overall. I'll admit I don't watch the live play because of limited time and my work schedule. Hey, that's fine. You know, it's not for everyone. I myself am not a huge fan of actual play, even though I produce them. I do so mainly because you enjoy them, not because I so much enjoy them myself, which sometimes I feel like maybe that's hypocritical, but I don't know. We do things all the time for other people that we don't do for ourselves, right? So I guess it's not a big deal. I find the shows you do on the books and breaking them down in sections a little at a time very useful. All in all, I really enjoy listening to all your shows. You really crack me up a lot. And then Thomas talks, and I don't even remember what he's talking about. But I'm sure I said it. But he says I was waiting on an air conditioner unit that I'd ordered to fit in my oddly shaped and sized windows that I have in my house. He says, "You kept talking about how crazy hot it was for being so far north, and how when you opened your window to let air in, you got a lot of smoke smell because Canada was on fire." Now, I know this doesn't even sound remotely funny as you read it, but the way you said it made me laugh out loud, and it's stuck in my head ever since, making it one of my favorite episodes. Well, thank you, Thomas. I'm glad that was amusing. I do remember being super hot in the summer with no AC and not able to open the windows because of the smoke, and it was probably making me a little loopy. I know we don't know each other, but when I'm listening to your show, it's like I'm hanging out with a friend. Oh, thank you. That's awesome. So things may not always go as we want or hope, but you have a great show. I hope you won't throw in the towel, but sometimes life makes us change directions when we don't want to. I plan on staying a huge fan no matter what. And then Thomas goes on to say that he really likes my wife Nikki's art that I post on Google Plus. My wife Nikki is an artist. She does a lot of abstract art, and if you follow me on Google Plus or Twitter, you will often see it as I will repost things that she posts. So if you're a fan of art, you can check that out. So thank you so much, Thomas. I really appreciate the kind words, and I'm glad you're still enjoying the show. Listener GM Brad also wrote in and said, "Hey, Lex, I was just listening to your latest Game Master's Journey podcast on random encounters, and of course, enjoying it. I'm currently DMing D&D campaigns in both 4th edition and 5th edition, and have GM'd Numenera, so I followed you through both GM Intrusions and now into Game Master's Journey. I've always found your podcast to be useful, and of the many RPG podcasts I follow, yours always makes it to the top of my listening list." Well, thank you, Brad. That's high praise. Thank you. That said, I apologize I've never contributed through Patreon, though I have bought a Game Master Journey shirt, and enjoy it very much. That's fine, Brad. I mean, there are a lot of great ways that people can help support the show, and Patreon is just one of them. And I know it's not a good solution for a lot of people. So, I mean, getting a t-shirt, that's awesome. And, hopefully in the future, I'm going to be putting out more RPG supplements, which will be a great way to support the show and what I'm doing and get something for it. So, going forward, that'll maybe be a better way for more people to help out than the Patreon. It's always easier to do a one-time purchase than to have to make a monthly commitment, I think. Brad says, anyhow, I just had some thoughts on your funding chat from the beginning of the podcast. Have you considered doing a Kickstarter? And then he mentions Matt Colville's Strongholds and Streaming Kickstarter, which this was before I had Matt on the show when he emailed me. So hopefully, Brad, you enjoyed that episode with Matt Colville. So Brad is awesome. Brad gave me like 10 ideas of different things I could do that I could kickstart. And I mean, they're all great ideas. Some of these are things I've actually thought about doing. Some of the things are things I'd never thought about doing. But to answer the general question, have I ever thought about doing a Kickstarter? Yes, I have. And in fact, a few weeks ago, I posted a thread to our Google Plus community asking if anyone would be interested if I did a Kickstarter for a D&D supplement where I would compile all my stuff about Primordia and all the homebrewed stuff I've done and kind of make this book with stuff about Primordia, class options, feats, spells, backgrounds, all that kind of stuff. However, I got very little feedback on that, and I think only had literally one or two people that indicated any kind of interest in that. So I tabled that idea because it would take way more than one or two people to make doing a Kickstarter worth it and to have any chance of that Kickstarter actually funding. But it is an idea that's always in the back of my head. One thing Brad mentioned was maybe doing something kind of like what Matt Colville did, where I could do a Kickstarter for some kind of RPG supplement and also for the podcast to help fund the podcast. So that's something I hadn't thought about. I have thought about doing a Kickstarter for the podcast, and I have thought about doing a Kickstarter for, some kind of RPG supplement, but I had not considered combining them into one Kickstarter. So that might be something to consider. So, yeah, like I said, Brad gave me a lot of great ideas of different kinds of things. He thinks I could kickstart stuff about Alondria, new cleric domains, which I have come up with a few for my campaign I'm running right now. More information on the planes, information on my gods and my pantheon. Yeah, he has a lot of stuff about gods and how to tie gods into the campaign and different character classes and stuff like that. So yeah, those are all things I would consider. But again, I don't feel like the interest is there right now that I could do a successful Kickstarter. And it could be that I'm wrong. When I did that interest check, I posted it on Facebook and Google Plus and Twitter, I think. But, it really is a relatively small percentage of my listeners who keep track of any of those things. So it's possible that there are a lot of people that would be interested in that just didn't see those posts or didn't respond to them for whatever reason. So I guess what I'm saying is, if you're listening to this and if you'd be interested in more RPG products from me, or maybe some kind of enhancements to the podcast that I could do a Kickstarter for, let me know. I'd love to hear your ideas. And, kind of an outgrowth of this, and I talked about this earlier in the show, was, at least for right now, my thoughts are, instead of trying to kickstart some big project, I'm instead going to do a lot of the things I was thinking of doing in that Kickstarter project, but do them more piecemeal and do smaller individual PDFs that will take a lot less time and resources to develop, so I can just do it a little bit at a time and make these PDFs available on my website for people to purchase. And that also will be a way to gauge not just interest, but more importantly, how many people are actually going to pay money to get my supplements. And if I see good numbers from how those are doing, then I may get to a point where I can kickstart something bigger, which I would love to do it. Nothing would make me happier than to kickstart some kind of RPG supplement, like a Primordia book, or kind of my version of like a Xanathar's guide kind of thing with a bunch of new player option stuff, or some kind of book on GMing tips or whatever. I mean, there's so many different things I'd love to do. Right now, I don't think the interest is there, but I'd be happy to be proven wrong about that. So if you'd like to see stuff like that, definitely let me know. All right, so that's the end of the feedback that I wanted to go through today. And again, I want to thank everyone who gives me feedback, all the different ways people give me feedback. And I apologize if you've gotten a hold of me and I didn't cover it today. But thank you so much to everyone. I really appreciate it. All right, well, it's about to wrap up episode 213 of Game Master's Journey. I hope you enjoyed our discussion today and taking a break from the actual play to talk about some of your questions and your comments and things I have planned for the future and all that good stuff. If you'd like to get a hold of me, I would love to hear from you. I'd love to hear your comments, your questions, your feedback on the show. You can email me at gamemastersjourney@gmail.com. You can follow me on Twitter @LexStarWalker. And you can also call my voicemail at 951-GMJ-LEX1. That's 951-465-5391. You can find all that contact information and other ways you can get a hold of me in the show notes. You can find those show notes at starwalkerstudios.com/GameMastersJourney. Also in the show notes, you'll find links where you can connect with the Game Masters Journey community on our forum, Google Plus, and Discord. And there you can connect with other listener GMs in the community and share your ideas, your questions, your stories, share your worlds that you're building, and share your relic items you come up with. If you enjoy this show and you'd like to help support it and help me keep doing this every week, you can find all the ways you can do so at starwalkerstudios.com/support. There's even some possibilities there that won't cost you any money. A great way that you can support what I'm doing is to purchase one of my self-published RPG products. I have an adventure for D&D, The Trickster's Labyrinth, that's available. And very soon my Relics supplement will be available as well. And you can find those at starwalkerstudios.com. And finally, if you want to show off your support to your gaming friends, you can get a Game Master's Journey t-shirt or a Trickster's Labyrinth t-shirt. And yeah, there's lots of great ways to support the show, and however you help me out and however you help keep this show going, thank you. And I really appreciate it. I hope that you have a chance to play your favorite RPG this week. I hope you have a chance to run your favorite RPG. I'll be back soon with another episode of Game Master's Journey. Until then, game on with your kick-ass, overpowered relic.
This has been a Starwalker Studios production, your source for quality gaming and hobby podcasts.
This episode's music, courtesy of Cloudwalker, Transboy, Renfield, Stanko, and Ish. See the show notes for more details at starwalkerstudios.com/GameMastersJourney.